Welcome back. Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us once again. My Twitter account is at AM Salazar, and I do a lot of tweeting on at Mexico Daily. So hopefully you join me as we try to describe what's going on in Mexico, both in English and in Spanish. So I really appreciate you joining us throughout the years. A lot happened this week. It's almost hard to follow every single headline or news of what's happening in Mexico. I mean, the number of reforms that are taking place, the implementation of very controversial constitutional reforms, what's happening with the Supreme Court and the judicial branch in general. Of course, there's a lot of security issues, a lot of continued concern of what's happening with violence in the northern part of Mexico. And of course, an additional factor is a re-elected Donald Trump, who is already it appears he's starting to make decisions in terms of programs and projects that will have a profound impact on the bilateral relationship between both countries, Mexico and the United States. That's why I really appreciate today's guest returning to Living in Mexico, Federico Berrueto, very well-known political analyst. He's been joining us throughout the years. I don't know, Federico, what do you want to start with?
Nice to talk to you. Talking to you. We can speak about the judicial reform that, in my view, it's an impossible electoral process. Yeah. It's impossible. It's heading to failure because the whole system, electoral system of any country, but mostly the Mexican electoral system, departs from political parties.
Right.
It's concerned with political parties. When you vote for someone, you know that it belongs or it represents a political party. So you have an idea of the candidate.
Right.
But when you are going to elect individuals, you don't know who is here, who is the candidate,
what do they represent?
For, against, how can, as a voter, I can choose from this or from the other? You don't have any idea. The electoral system is not, it cannot manage individuals. You cannot have an individual candidate. It's very, very complex. Moreover, if you have many candidates. So that means that it's impossible to have a electoral process with good candidates, with good debates, that the voter or the elector is enthusiastic in order to vote. So you can see right now several things that shows us that is heading to failure, the electoral process. First of all, the electoral authority is asking for 90 days, 3 months more in order to have the election. That means that they know that they cannot organize the election in, let's say, traditional terms. So they are going to do something different, and I think they are going to use not the casilla or the, how do you call it, the place where you are going to vote, not the 100,000 casillas or places, but rather you are going to have, I don't know, perhaps 50,000, 60,000
right,
instead of the 170,000. And also they asking for money, and the Congress or the Chamber of Deputies says that there is no money.
No money. Yeah.
So I don't know how you can have a good electoral process if you don't have the money to prepare it or to do it. And also, and mostly, I think you don't have candidates. I mean, you have candidates from the legislative power, candidates from the executive power, and candidates from the judicial system. The judicial system, as far as I know, is around 10 or 15% of the numbers that you have to fill as a candidate.
How many candidates, do we know how many, what is the exact number? Or do you have an exact number of the number of candidates? It's,
as far as I know, I think you is a little bit more than 5,000 candidates that each of the branches has to fulfill. The judicial system is around 15%, no more than 20%. And the register of candidates ends this Sunday. So, and the executive is in the 50%, and the legislative is around 60, 70%. You are not going to have the candidates. Why? Because no one believes in the process. And if you don't have candidates, you are not going to have voters.
You know, we were reporting on how the one of the heads of the commissions was calling on students to register, because they need to they have to fulfill a certain quota. And of course they have those very funny ads. Did you see those of cute little kitties basically saying, run, become a judge? I mean, it looks like ads for 10 years olds. So
but we are talking, Ana Maria, of federal judges, magistrates, even the justices. So it's crazy what is going on right now.
So
and
do you think that they're going to postpone it because the National Electoral Institute is basically saying, you know, we can't do it. Let's postpone it 3 more months, or give us more time, and maybe we'll be able to organize this. But it seems as of right now, the fact that they haven't really told them how much money they're going to have for the elections, they haven't told the National Electoral Institute how much money they're going to have. They ran out of time. I mean, you can't organize elections that size if they didn't start like yesterday. And 3, you know, they're struggling to get candidates. So I don't know how they're going to do this.
Well, they don't care about to have they are really uninterested in order to have a good process. They don't care about it. So there is going to we are going to have elections. All of that is going to be an absolute failure, but they don't care about it. If only 10% of the people is going to vote, they are going to say it was perfect. We are living in an era of cynicism, and in that respect, they don't care about the disaster.
So that is just one of the issues that came up this week. The other topic that I'd like to talk to you about is the vote, the constitutional reform that has been voted on, where basically there's a group of autonomous agencies that will disappear. The one that I really think is the one that worries me the most is the disappearance of the INAI, the National Electoral, or it's the agency. It's not electoral. It's the agency that basically has the responsibility to protect your information, your private information, and to assure access to government information, to make sure it becomes public. Well, they're disappearing it. And, you know, it was this organization. Remember when it was, when the reform took place 20 years, a little bit more than 20 years ago? It was Mexico was proud. I thought it was an extraordinary moment for Mexico, because you would have transparency.
Yeah, it was an initiative of the civil society, not of a political party, not of a politician, but rather it came from the civil society, the Oaxaca groups. I think it was the name of the organization. But really, it's a pity that not only what happened, but that there is no strong voice in order to contain, to stop that madness. Really, it's a pity.
Yeah, and it's a good. You have a point there, a very good point. The fact that the INAI was created based on pressures and organization by civil society, and civil society right now is nowhere to be seen. In fact, many of the people who have been involved in this constitutional reform years ago were part of a civil society that would pressure government and promote transparency. So I think it is quite the whole thing is quite insane, because they really have not explained why that INAI has to disappear. Coneval, I guess, which is the agency that has the responsibility to evaluate, it's an independent agency, the kind of the poverty or the levels of poverty in Mexico. But I guess I understand why they want to disappear it. It duplicates functions, but people don't trust government data. So the Coneval was kind of an alternative to that, to having real information on the status of poverty in Mexico. I don't know. The other agencies, what do you think?
Well, what I can see is that we are in a process, a political process, that really the government or the regime, the political regime, is heading to an autocracy. Right. And really nobody, or there is not a resistance not from the media, not from the civil society, not from political parties, not from the entrepreneurs. Really, the government is doing what they want, and no one is stopping the government. They are not facing any cost, political cost, in order to abuse of power.
All of this is happening at a moment where finally President Claudia Sheinbaum took a step that really gives us a sense that she could be a different president, maybe, than Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, because she actually traveled to a G20 meeting where she wasn't there. I mean, she was there about 24 hours because she had to come back and preside the parade, the November 20th parade, the Revolution Parade, military parade. And so she came back, but she did have the opportunity to speak in a multilateral event. And she had a series of bilateral meetings, some of them very brief, but at least she's out there. You know what I mean? And that is a big change from prior President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador.
Well, I think we missed a great opportunity. Of course, all the publicity, the propaganda, the Mexican propaganda picture gave us a picture of success, a very successful meeting, but it was it disappointing. Why? Because we have a lot of problems. For instance, the environment. We have a problem of let's say the migration program that is a global problem, and we need another view, and also the problem of violence and security. We need another paradigm in order to combat the organized crime, and the punitive view doesn't solve the problem. So it was a very good opportunity to speak about many things that are very, very important for Mexico. But she presented a program of Lopez Obrador that is a complete failure. That is Sembrando Vida. Sembrando Vida is a
the
program.
Reforestation. The reforestation program. Yeah.
I don't know the precise words in English, but in Spanish es una farsa. It's a fraud.
Yeah, it's a fraud. So all of this is happening. Well, and the other thing I have to say about that meeting is that there was a very brief bilateral meeting between Biden and Claudia Sheinbaum. And she emphasized on the fact that she continues to demand from the U.S. government more information regarding the detention and arrest of Mayo Zambada in the United States. They're obsessed with it. I think, there's issues. I think the United States still probably has some issues it hasn't shared, but they're very concerned. They're very preoccupied with what happened, and I'm not too sure why. What difference would it make in terms of these next couple of weeks, which are critical for Mexico because Biden is on his way out and Donald Trump's back?
Yeah, and Donald Trump is coming with a view very, very aggressive. to Mexico, and Mexico, I think the government of Mexico is not behaving or is not facing the problem to the extent. What I want to tell you is that Mexico hasn't behaved very, very well. The way that Americans see Mexico, not only Trump, any American, see that you have a government that is colluded with organized crime, that there is a lot of violence and the authorities doesn't care, that there is a problem of fentanyl in the States that comes from Mexico and the authorities they don't care about it. And also that Chinese products and Chinese investment in Mexico are using the country in order to go into the American market. That is a view that comes from the States. And you are not doing anything in order to say, well, I have a different perspective because that is going on in Mexico, because really we are doing that. Oh, the Chinese are not so as you think so, or something like that. But I cannot see the government answer to that sort of problem, to the whole negative view about Mexico.
Right. Well, and you're absolutely right. This week, there was a lot of messages coming, not only from the United States, but from Canada, of all places, questioning Mexico's commercial policy and the fact that, an extraordinary number of, Chinese products are entering Mexico, and there's also plants and companies that are establishing in Mexico. And I guess they're blaming the Mexican government for allowing the investment because, according, I spoke to Juan Carlos Baker yesterday. He's the former Deputy Secretary of Commerce, and he said there is really no evidence that Chinese products are being shipped to the United States or to Canada. The issue for those countries is more that products that should be produced in the United States or in Canada is what concerns them, is to protect their workers against potential Chinese, the influx of Chinese in Mexico. But I don't see how this is going to be resolved until, like you say, information has to be made public and negotiations on the USMCA begin.
Well, I think that if Mexico doesn't prove that the authorities have control in Chinese imports, I don't think we are going to have a good moment in the negotiations of the trade agreement. And the government has to work very, very hard, not only to show that Chinese investment in Mexico is not as high as Canada and the States think on that, but also the policies, the public policy in order to contain the Chinese goods and investment in Mexico.
It's like I said, it was a wild week, and in addition to statements made by the United States regarding the presence of Chinese in Mexico, of course, it's these statements made by Donald Trump, which he has threatened to implement a massive deportation program, which, by the way, most of those deported are probably going to be Mexicans.
Most of them, yeah, sure. And Ana Maria, it's unbelievable that when you are going to need the arguments about human rights, because migration, the concept of human rights is the main pillar. At the same time, you destroy the National Commission of Human Rights in Mexico by re-electing
an incompetent person.
That is
incompetent, yeah, very incompetent
from the beginning to the end. So how, for me, it's very, very difficult to understand why, if you need a policy of human rights in order to protect Mexicans abroad, why you are really uninterested in order to do something in Mexico about
Yeah.
the National Commission of Human Rights.
Jeez. Well, like I said, it's been what, 2 months since she has been, she was sworn in as president, a little bit more than 2 months. And Donald Trump has barely been 3 weeks, since he won the election. So, and it's already crazy. This is a nut house on both sides of the country. That's why I always appreciate you joining us here and living in Mexico, Federico. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ana Maria.
Thank you, Federico Berrueto, with an update on all this political news. I don't know, maybe we should now call political news craziness taking place both in Mexico and the United States. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to go to commercial break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar, and you're listening and watching Living in Mexico. Please don't go away. I'll be right back.
Muchas gracias, Ana María.
Gracias.
Voy saliendo ahorita a Campeche, así que me despido de...
Te mando un abrazo.
Eres
Hasta
muy
luego.
amable. Y te voy a mandar ahí los datos de una página vieja, pero te puedes ver ahí